What's up everybody? So in this video we're going to be doing some IB questions, paper 1 questions on the topic 5.3. So this is basically, if you don't know, this is everything related to the plant phylums, animal phylums, the classification of biodiversity, dichotomous key, all of these kinds of things. So let's just get started. Below is a phylogenetic tree of 3 domains. So we can see here, this is like a diagram that shows if this is the origin of life right here, as time went on, they decided to, this origin of life split into 3 categories: eukaryotes, archaea, and eubacteria. So 3 main categories, and we call these domain. That means all of the organisms on Earth we can classify as either eukaryote, archaea, or eubacteria. Now they're asking you here, there are important differences between these 3 domains. There are many, okay, and I made it in my teaching video, so if you don't know anything about this, go check those out first. Now, which of these domains have organelles? So one of the key things we have to know is that eubacteria and archaea, these 2 domains, are prokaryotic cells, whereas the eukaryote domain is made up of eukaryotic cells. That's why we know animals like us and plants, for example here, plants and animals, are made up of eukaryotic cells. So what is the difference between eukaryotic cells and prokaryotic cells? A difference is that eukaryotic cell is the only one, eukaryotic organism is the only one that has organelles inside them, because eukaryotic cells have organelles, whereas archaea and eubacteria do not. Let me try and find this here. So think about this, right? We can classify them under domain. So these 3 eukaryotic cells are like plants and animals and fungi and more, and they have organelles like a nucleus, like a mitochondria. Same with the plant cell here, you can see. Whereas these 2 simply look like this. They have no organelles, no membrane enclosed organelles, simply have their DNA, and that's about it. Okay, so that's one key difference. So which would be the answer? So which of these domains have organelles? It's going to be eukaryotes only. Okay, so it's going to be D. Okay, a plant has a cambium in its vascular tissue, and pollen is produced in male cones. The plant disperses seeds but does not produce fruit. In which phylum does this plant belong? So this is a tricky question because they give you some words that you may not be familiar with, such as cambium. This is a word you will learn if you do HL, plant biology. So, but regardless of that, you can still answer this question and get the question right, regardless of knowing what cambium is. Okay, so don't worry, you can still do it. So as we read it, we know a plant has a cambium, which doesn't matter, in its vascular tissue. Okay, vascular tissue. So we know, let me go this way. No, to the plants. We know that plants, the phylum plants, can be classified as either Bryophyta, Phyllosynophyta, Coniferophyta, and Angiospermophyta. And these all have some vague differences, right? Which is why there are considered different classifications. Now, they are saying here in this question, which of these types, because here they have the 4 types, has vascular tissue and pollen produced in male cones. So we know that Bryophyta does not have vascular tissue, so we can automatically eliminate D. Let me show you. So let's go find Bryophyta. I gotta go up here. So Bryophyta here are the key details you need to know, and one of them is that they have no vascular system. This means they have no phloem or xylem, which helps carry water and nutrients from the soil upwards, because these plants are so short anyways. It's like moss. They don't need these vascular systems because they grow on the floor. So there's no need for pipes to bring water upwards. No need for a vascular system. So automatically we can eliminate D, because Bryophyta is definitely not going to be the one. Now, which of these then have pollen produced in male cones? So cones gives it away. We know Coniferophyta are named Coniferophyta because they produce cones. Let me show you. So let's go down to cones, Coniferophyta. So they produce cones. They produce seeds which can be stored in cones or pollen. Okay, this is what gives us an away. We kind of know it's going to be A, but let's keep reading. The plant disperses seeds but does not produce fruit. So this is where we got to be careful. Okay, because let me show you. Angiospermophyta produces fruit. Okay, so this is what gives it away here as well, because it's saying the plant disperses seed but does not produce fruit. So this confirms even more that it's not Angiospermophyta, because Angiospermophyta can produce fruit. They can produce fruit. Okay, but Coniferophyta has cones and they cannot produce fruit. So this kind of, and they have a vascular system. So this gives it away for the answer to be A. So you can see it's really important to remember all of these details about each of these, because they're going to ask you to, they're basically going to ask questions in a way that test if you remember the differences between these and what's unique about each one and all that. But they're not hard. If you remember the things, the questions themselves are not that hard. It's more of a memorizing game. Okay. What features distinguishes platyhelminths from Annelida? So where does this come from? So we know that just like there's a plant kingdom which has different phylums, there's also an animal kingdom which has different phylums. These phylums include all of these that I have here, and they all, just like the plant phylums, have their differences. Okay, so now this specific question is asking to distinguish between platyhelminths and Annelida. Okay, platyhelminths and Annelida. So let me bring it down. Let's go down to, oh no, up here. So Annelida, so they're doing this in terms of segmented body or non-segmented body. So let's look at Annelida. So Annelida here is one that has, see, it is considered a segmented worm, and you'll see why. Because these worms have segments on them. They're like made up of, if you look really closely at them, let me make this a bit bigger. You can see that they are made of little segments. You can see like these little segments, right? Whereas the platyhelminths, so these are also worms, but they don't have these segments. They are considered flatworm. They are non-segmented because they look like this. They're one smooth, flat worm instead of a segmented worm like these Annelidas. So in essence, Annelidas are considered segmented, whereas the platyhelminths are considered non-segmented. So that's the difference here. So this would be B. Okay, let's do another one here. Which is a characteristic of both Bryophyta and Phyllocenophyta. So again, they're bringing us now to the plant phylums, right? Because remember, the plant phylums had the Bryophyta, Phyllocenophyta, Coniferophyta, and Angiospermophyta. Now they're asking us, what is a characteristic of both of these? In other words, what do both of these have in common? Is it A, vascular tissue? No, remember I said Bryophyta does not have vascular tissue. Bryophyta is like moss. They grow so low on the ground, they don't need vascular tissue. But Phyllocenophyta does, but they don't both have it, so it can't be A. B, membranous leaves. Again, this is a random one because this is not a particular thing you learn about, so automatically you should kind of judge this one and think, oh, this is probably just a random thing they made up, but so I'm just going to leave this because this is not a key characteristic that they directly point out. Okay, it's not pointed out in your book or anything, so it's probably going to be some random sentence rather. We know, what I can say is that Bryophyta is considered to not really have leaves. They are considered to have what's called simple leaves, whereas Phyllocenophyta have proper leaves. So I guess that's what they mean by membranous leaves. Bryophyta don't really have proper leaves, so I guess they probably are not considered to have membranous leaves. I can show you here. If we go to Bryophyta, see, they are considered to have simple leaves, so it's not real leaves. It's like moss kind of leaves, and I guess these are considered non-membranous, whereas the Phyllocenophyta have proper leaves, so I guess these are membranous. So I guess for this question, they probably meant simple leaves here. I mean complex leaves, which Bryophyta do not have. They have simple leaves. So the answer is not going to be B, but it's going to be, you'll see when the answer comes, it's really obvious. So if you are unsure about B and you didn't know, the right answer, which is either C or D, will immediately let you know. So C is saying release of spores. Okay, so we know it's this one because both Bryophyta and Phyllocenophyta release spores. Look here, Phyllocenophyta produced by spores. And spores, by the way, I'll show you, I think up here, down here. Spores are like little dots like this. I don't know if you've ever looked really closely at a fern or a Phylloxera, but they have these little dots here. These are basically spores, which are like little things that help this where their DNA is stored inside, so that they can release it and make more plants, basically. So it's like little spores. Now both Phylloxera and Bryophyta have this. Let me show you. Bryophyta, where's Bryophyta? Also has it, but see, here it is. But their spores are located really high. It's not on the leaves, it's like up here. But regardless, both Bryophyta and Phylloxera have spores. So it's gonna be C. We know it's gonna be C. That's something we were clearly taught. That's something you're clearly taught. Now D, evergreen spines. Again, maybe you're confused about this because this was never taught. So most likely if you have never heard of it, it's probably because you've never been taught it. But we know it's gonna be C. So the IB will do this to you sometimes and you need to get used to it. They're gonna say some sentences or some phrases that may sound random to you and you're not sure. Just keep going and try and find one that really pops out and is definitely right. So they're testing if you know what you should know. Okay, in this case, you should know C, so you're still able to do it. Okay, in which domain are Bryophyta found? So again, Bryophyta is one of the phylums of the plant kingdom. So which domain? Is it going to be, okay, first of all, Plantae is not a domain, that's a kingdom. So that A is definitely wrong, but B, C, and D are all kingdoms. Archaea, Eubacteria, and Eukaryotes. We know all plants are, so Bryophyta we know is under the plant kingdom. All plants are made up of eukaryotic cells. So we know it's going to belong to the domain eukaryote, and we can see it here. When I made the diagram, it is eukarya, that's the main domain. Then we have plant as a kingdom, so it's under the domain eukarya. Okay, eukaryotes, made up of eukaryotic cells. So it's going to be here D, eukaryote. All the other ones are prokaryotes or a kingdom. So it's okay. So that's it for this video. I will be making a part 2 or another part next right after this. So make sure to check that one out.